Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Before we start today's event, I would like to remind you to always turn your microphone on during this event. And you can turn your camera on if there is no trouble, then put the virtual background, which are given by our committee before. From here on, please let me to open this event. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody, everyone. First of all, let's praise our God, Allah, the most gracious, most merciful, the creator and sustainer of the universe. Peace be upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the last messenger of Allah who has guided human life from the destruction into the right way. In this opportunity, we are delighted to welcome you in today's event, guest lecturer editor-in-chief of Food Chemistry in conjunction with Pharmacist Webinar Series 9, with the title Publishing a World-Class Scientific Paper, What Does the Editor Expect from the Authors? And my name is Beneficia Rosiacha, and it is an awesome and prestigious change for me to be the master of ceremony in this event on Monday, November 21st, 2020, and participants. Welcome to our main speaker, Honorable Dr. Paul Finglas, Editor-in-Chief, Food Chemistry. Hello, Dr. Finglas.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good afternoon in Indonesian time.
Okay, Asian time, yeah, sure.
And also welcome, Also welcome to our moderator, Honorable Dr. Nancy Dewi Yuliana. Good afternoon, Dr. Nancy.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yeah, hope you always well. And last but not least, welcome to all of participants. Our highest appreciation and thank you for joining this event. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our agenda for today, let us pray to the Almighty God based on our belief. Pray begin.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind words. And thanks very much for inviting me to speak today.
Okay.
This is a sort of talk that we give from time to time in different countries. We've done it several times. So it's a good opportunity to talk you through the journals, what we require, and also a little bit about how you would structure your manuscript. So I will talk about the food chemistry journals, a little bit about Elsevier scholarly publishing, how you would select a journal, writing your article, the peer review process. I then say a little bit about publishing ethics and different types of, well, two main types of publishing models as well towards the end. So this is me. I've been with Food Chemistry as an editor since 1995. The journal was established in 1974. Since then, it's really expanded. Food Chemistry X was launched a couple of years ago, and it's very similar to Food Chemistry, except that it's an open access journal. And that's the main difference. So I'm a research scientist in food nutrition. I'm based at Quadram Institute in UK, and also managing director of Europe Association, non-profit association, which is based in Belgium. And your main interest is around food information, particularly food data. So that's me. If we just introduce we've actually got 4 related journals in the food chemistry family. So if I just go through those, Food Chemistry launched 1976, sorry, not 1974. It's grown to impact factor 9.231 in the last citations, which is really good. Food journals are notoriously have low impact journals, so to have a journal at nearly 10 is quite excellent, and it's in the top 5, I think, of the food science journals. The second journal is Food Chemistry X. As I said, it's the open access journal of food chemistry, and it's already grown to impact factor 6.433 in 3 years, which again is quite excellent. And then the other 2 journals that we have that we've created in the last few years. The third one is Food Chemistry Molecular Sciences. That hopefully will have a impact factor in 2023, and this is more about sort of, I would say, biological data, biological ways, biological methods, DNA type methods, or antibody type methods, and it has a little bit more biochemistry and nutrition. If we move on to the third journal, and that is Food Chemistry Advances, that was launched in 2021. Again, that's open access, and that doesn't have an impact factor at the moment. And again, it's similar to Food Chemistry X, but it has a slightly lower threshold for submission of manuscripts. So they're the 4 journals, and again, I'm chief editor of 2 of them. Dr. Sean Ashley edits the 3rd one, and Dong Zhao Sunwaterhouse from New Zealand is the editor-in-chief of the last one. So if we move on to the food chemistry team, in addition to myself, we have 3 senior editors: Demetrius from University of Reading, UK, Daniel Granato, University of Limerick, and Dong Zhao from South China University. And alongside myself and the 3 senior editors, we will be reviewing and triaging submitted manuscripts before they get assigned to editors or they get rejected or transferred to other journals. And then in addition to that, we have around 25 editors and associate editors to deal with quite large volumes of manuscripts that we have coming through, including at the moment, I would say we'll probably go through 10,000 manuscripts this year, which is a huge number. We just break through that, I think, by the end of December. So if you want to find out more about the journal, you can go to the URL web link here, sciencedirect.com, journal food chemistry, and you have all the information there. So just to move on a little bit to the scope of food chemistry, it's mainly around advancement of the chemistry and biochemistry of foods, together with analytical methods and processes that are used to measure components in food. And they should focus really on novelty of the research or method to development validation. And again, we would expect the analytical methods to be applied to a number of foods and validated against other reference methods. And we don't generally accept papers around botanicals, plants, and herbs. So that is one of the common problems we have with authors. They continually to submit manuscripts around those particular components, but it's really food that's at the focus of our attention. to go down a little bit more into the main sections. So we're dealing with major and minor components of food, their nutritional, excuse me, physiological and sensory flavour and microbiological aspects. We're dealing with bioactive compounds of food, including antioxidants and phytochemicals. Not sure why botanicals is mentioned there, but it's mainly phytochemicals, things like polyphenols and other non-nutrient compounds that have a health benefit. And again, the data presented must have a discussion to demonstrate relevance to food or food chemistry. That's really important. You can't just submit papers with data on its own. It needs to be put into context. So as we move down, we have chemical and biochemical composition and structure changes in molecules and components induced by processing, distribution, and domestic conditions. Things like browning, how that affects the carbohydrate, sugars, etc. We have effects of processing, composition, quality, and safety of foods, other bio-based materials, byproducts, and processing waste streams as well, as long as they're related to food. And then lastly, it's chemistry of food additives, contaminants, and other agrochemicals, together with their metabolism, toxicology, and food fate. So again, we do have some food safety papers, but we don't really accept papers around surveillance. There's probably better journals that can take those. Okay, so if we move on. So these are papers that are out of scope, which is always quite important to say. We don't accept papers that are purely clinical or engineering without contribution to the chemistry. Pharmaceutical or non-food, herbal remedies, traditional or folk medicines, as I said earlier, and also surveillance data. Again, outside scope. Research advancing theory and practice of molecular sciences of food, cure and prevention of human diseases, again, outside scope, and papers on therapeutic application of food components isolated for treatment, cure, prevention of human diseases, again, would not be accepted. You need to look more at nutritional journals or clinical journals for those sorts of papers. Just check. Oh, out of scope. Okay. So before you accept, before you submit a paper to any journal, you really do need to check the aims and scope of that journal. You should also look carefully at the guide for authors. Make sure you're preparing manuscripts that meet the guide for authors. You should always make sure the text is written in a good English. You can actually get some help with improving the English requirements. There's an English language editing service available from Elsevier, but also from other offerings that you can find on the internet. Manuscript text is divided into different sections. We usually ask for line and page numbers, and the text can be double spaced. That just helps its readability, and it makes reviewing by reviewers a lot easier to handle. Number 5 is an ethical statement. If you're submitting manuscripts that have experiments involving humans or animals, on the animal side, we always would expect a statement on how animals were slaughtered, and obviously need to be slaughtered in an ethically based way. That's quite important. Any conflict of interest statement can be included at the end of the manuscript. We normally restrict the numbers of figures and tables to a total of 6, but you can have additional tables as supplementary material in the online version. So again, you don't necessarily need to stick to 6. What I would say, sorry, I've just gone. What I would say is always make sure that you don't have too many tables and figures, and they need to add to what's written in the text. They shouldn't replicate what's in the text, but they should add value to what's written in the text. So again, supplementary material is useful, but only if it adds value to the manuscript. We don't want table after table of repetitive information. So you need to include your references, peer-reviewed articles, websites, etc., in the reference list. Normally a covering letter introducing your article and explaining particularly the novelty of the research that you've done, or the novelty of the method that you're developing and validating. You can highlight, identify important outcomes of your work, and make sure that you can have 3 to 5 bullet points showing the most significant findings, and there's a limit on the number of characters. So that's a useful checklist for you to go through before you even submit your manuscript. Where are we now? Submission checklist. Okay, so I won't say too much about Elsevier because you probably already know they're one of the top international publishers in terms of scientific and other areas. They just look at some of the facts: 2 million articles submissions, 500,000 published articles, 23,000 editors, 87,000 editorial boards, and 1 million reviewers. So it's a pretty enormous undertaking in terms of publication. It also, you look at journals, books, and other articles. So the facts are fairly substantial there. Okay, so let's go on to choosing the right journal, and this is something that is often overlooked by authors. They just want to publish, to the highest impact journal, and they don't pay enough attention to their manuscript and where the best journal would be for readership. So you need to think about your audience. Like for food chemistry, it's definitely around foods, chemistry of foods. If it was more clinical, you would look more at clinical nutrition journals or other types of journal. You need to check very carefully if your research is in scope. We do get inquiries from authors from time to time asking if their paper is in spec. Most of the time, the papers that we see are out of spec. They're clearly out of spec. They're on something totally different, either on medicine or clinical nutrition or disease prevention. So again, it's really a waste of your time, waste of our time, if you're submitting papers that are not in scope. You need to think about the peer review process, and it's useful to submit 3 or 4 potential referees. They shouldn't be referees that you have a research collaboration with. They should be independent referees that in the field that could be able to review your paper. Again, you should talk to your supervisor and colleagues and discuss again what would be the best journal for your piece of work. You need to look at your reference list. And again, sometimes that's quite useful for identifying potential reviewers that have also published in your area. You need to look at impact metrics of the journal. It's very nice to publish in high impact journals, but every author will not have high impact manuscripts all the time. There might be a lesser impact manuscript, so you might need to look at a lower journal in the food area. You need to have a look at the editorial board to see whether there are scientists, researchers on there that you know of that cover your area. There's also a committee on publication ethics that oversees publication in the scientific literature, and they set out some useful guidelines for the ethics of publishing, what to do and what not to do. So again, it's very useful to look at those guidelines. Three major things here in choosing the journal. You should only choose one journal for submitting your manuscript. You need to make sure all the authors are in agreement, which is very important, and they agree to the final version of the manuscript. And then you need to check the journal website to make sure your manuscript has been prepared in the correct way. So, writing your article. You have figures and tables. You'll have your methods, your results, and your discussion conclusions. Conclusions are then your introduction. So first of all, you need to get your data together. Then it's a good idea to think about the results. Then you should start putting your methods together, your discussion of the results, and you can write your introduction once you've got the bulk of your paper together. And then you need to identify some key conclusions as well. And then title, abstract, keywords are also quite important. We don't want a long title. It needs to be succinct and cover the main aspects of the paper. The abstracts are limited in terms of number of words, but again, they should cover the main aspects of the paper, a little bit of background, why the work was needed, what was done, a few key methods, and your major results and findings, and that needs to be in a word limit. So again, that is quite important, and a few keywords at the end of the abstract. Okay, so preparing your article. Editors, reviewers, and readers want well-presented manuscripts with the aims and the scope of their journals. So, presenting a well-thought-through manuscript can help the editors, and it can also help the reviewers, and it can put reviewers in a good mood when they look through your manuscript, and they can find the logical and they can understand it. What's very frustrating is if manuscripts are prepared poorly, the English is not so good. And when you look at that, and if you were to send it to reviewers, reviewers are going to be not very happy looking through and providing comments. So always try and keep the editors and the reviewers happy. And there's a few steps here for that approach. So you need to follow the guide for authors. You need to set your manuscript out logically, check the English is okay, give it to a native English speaker to look at. If it's a research paper, then make sure your hypothesis or what you're trying to test is in the last section of your introduction. 2 or 3 lines. What's your hypothesis, and how are you addressing it in the paper? You should also look at presenting a short summary of the main drivers behind your research. Do not overfill the introduction. It should be a short summary of what's gone before and why you're doing what you're doing now. And then come back to your hypothesis in the discussion and conclusions. So you try and link the two. You can either combine your results and discussion into one section, or you could have a separate results discussion sections. It depends, what you prefer. Both are possible. You should not speculate beyond what the results can support. You can say a little bit in the discussion about what's missing or what the future work might be, but you should stick to the discussion of the results and what they show. That's really important. Have a look at your approach, the work you've done, and look for flaws and what you might have done differently. And then sometimes you can bring those into the discussion. If I had more samples, or if I had used this method, or I'd sampled at different points of the process or whatever. Just it's important to say that might help explain missing data or data with too much variation, etc. So as I say, include your future work in the conclusions. Avoid too much judgment about the impact of the work. Try and make the manuscript informative and interesting, and then always avoid abbreviations are okay, but make sure you put the first time you mention the abbreviation, you need to give the full wording, and try and avoid too much of jargon. Again, might be difficult for reviewers or editors to understand particular words. So try and avoid the jargon. So we're now moving on to submitting your article. So you have a clear letter stating the novelty of the research or the novelty of the method you're working on. Some keywords, some highlights. Again, you can have a graphical abstract, which is sometimes quite nice to see, where you present your results, your findings in a graphical way. Abstract, state briefly the purpose of the research, as well as the principal results and major conclusions. References, check the journal style. If it's numbering, use numbering. If it's alphabetical order, use alphabetical order. And also check the style of the references. Journals do differ, and it's very infuriating if you get a manuscript with references set out, but in the wrong format. Conclusions are important, and you should try and answer what you set out to test in your hypothesis. We don't want to see a summary of the results again. And again, visual information helps readability of the manuscript. Tables and figures, are important, but they need to be used very carefully. Sometimes a table is a good way of presenting results rather than writing it in the text. So think about your tables and figures. And they need to be eligible as well. Sometimes, they're too small, and you can't see particularly graphs. So check that they're all up to the quality that you would want to submit. Okay, so moving on to the peer review stage. And this sometimes can confuse or irritate authors. and you need to work with the journals to best get a review of your manuscript and a positive outcome. So the peer review is set up to determine the quality, the validity and significance and originality of your research or your analytical method. So the peer review process, the author submits the manuscript to the journal. So in the case of food chemistry, we have a journal office that would initially check things like English and length of article, and whether in scope. So at that stage, some manuscripts might be rejected. Most of them come through to the editor, the senior editors and myself, and we will then screen the manuscripts in terms of the technical and the scientific quality of the manuscript. Is it worth sending for peer review? And I would say for food chemistry, because we receive such a large number of manuscripts, we might reject 40 or 50% of submissions coming into the journal. At this stage, it's not uncommon for us to reject that number. So I'll come back to rejection later, but let's go on down the central line. So the editor then selects at least 2 reviewers. One of them could be from the reviewers that you've suggested. The other one will be, found from our reviewing database. In order to get 2 reviewers, we might have to send the manuscript to 5 or 6 reviewers. So that's why sometimes there is a delay. It's the challenge of finding two good reviewers, although sometimes we might end up with 3 or 4 reports. We're looking for a minimum of 2, so that's really important, and that sometimes takes time. We do it as quickly as we can. Sometimes, though, reviewers don't reply, they decline, and we have to invite more reviewers to get to that too. So once we get the reviewers' reports back, we would then look at the reviews and see whether or not the manuscript can be revised, in which case it goes back to the author, and it may go back to the author 1 or 2 times, depending on the degree of comments that have been made. We try to do that again as quickly as possible, but you're normally given a couple of weeks to send it back. Editors would then look at it, and then again it might go back to the reviewers for a second opinion, or it might be decision can be made by the editor. So that can go, this 2 or 3 times maybe this way. So if at that stage the editor decides that the manuscript cannot be accepted, it's just not salvable, either because there's major flaws, the science wasn't good, or there were some discrepancies or whatever. And that would be made on the basis of the reviewers' reports. If both reviewers said reject, then the manuscript would probably be rejected. If one said reject and one said major revision, then depending on the editor, it might go back to the author with major revision, but with a note to say that they must address the reviewer that said reject. You must address those reasons very carefully. We try and be fair, but on the other hand, we don't want to accept manuscripts that are just poor. So once the editor is happy, the manuscript is accepted, the article gets published, or it's rejected. It can be offered to other journals, and then it's entirely up to the author if they accept that redirection or not. I would say in the last few years, authors are probably not so willing to accept redirection to other journals. There's quite a low percentage will maybe 20% of authors would reject that and look to revise the manuscript for another journal themselves, or do extra work and improve the journal. At this initial screening phase stage here, where an article is rejected, again, it can be suggested that it gets sent to other journals that are more in scope for the manuscript. You've just picked the wrong journal. So at that stage, you might get rejected, but you would be offered other journals that you could submit your manuscript to. So that's a possibility. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so we're now at the reviewing stage. So there's a number of things that the reviewer will look for. They will have another look at the English, make sure it's clear and concise. A lot of reviewers are non-English speaking themselves. So again, they might struggle with some manuscripts, even though we think the English is all right. So just pay attention to that. They'll look at the title and make sure it reflects the contents of the manuscript. They'll look at the abstract, see whether it summarizes the work. They'll look at the methodology, make sure it's appropriate, it's been explained, and all the details are there, so the study could be repeated. It will look at the figures and tables, make sure that they're needed, they shouldn't be condensed or combined or even omitted. And then particularly they will look at the discussion and see whether or not that reflects the results that have been made. And then they will look at the conclusions and check the references. So normally that you would get back a pretty reasonable report, and they might pick up on one or more of those items and give some critique, which you should not take personally. It's a critique of the work, not yourself. So that's really important. Don't get offended by what they write. We make sure that it's focused and it's clear and it's fair. We're trying to make the manuscripts better so they can be published. And then in the revision options, if it's a major revision, we're saying that the manuscript could be published in the journal, but it needs some significant improvements. These must be corrected before it can be accepted. It can involve textual modifications and additional experiments, in which case you would have to do some extra work and produce some extra data. That's sometimes the case. A minor revision is saying that the manuscript is worth publishing and there's a few elements that need to be corrected or improved. You might need some reshortening, some restructuring, or some parts of the manuscript might be expanded. There might be some textual adaptations for the figures or the tables. What's important to remember, minor revision does not guarantee you're going to get acceptance. It's often accepted, but there may well be points that need to be readdressed either by the reviewers or the editor at that stage, but you're getting closer to the point of getting your manuscript accepted. So in terms of revising your manuscript, what you need to remember is you need to make this process easily understood by the editor and the reviewer. So the more you can do to explain what you've done in the revision, the better chance you're going to get this published. So usually you should take each of the reviewer's comments and write your response after each comment of what you've done to address that point. It's very infuriating if you get an author that just says, see manuscript. You know, that takes time for the editor and for the reviewer. So you need to write a few lines on what you've done to address that point. You need to state specifically what changes you've made, include the page numbers, line numbers, etc. Don't use statements like comment accepted, discussion change accordingly, because we need to see what you've done in a very clear, quick way. You can also provide a scientific response to the comments, and you can add, if you don't agree with a comment scientifically, you can provide an appropriate rebuttal to that comment, but it must be factual and it must be based on the science or the technology you used or whatever. You need to reduce your argument why that comment is not fair or is incorrect. And again, you need to write it in a way that your responses can be forwarded to the reviewer without changing. So you don't want to criticize the reviewer necessarily. You want to make sure that whatever goes back to him, he's not going to take offense at. So try and keep it factual, address the comments, changes you've done, and then hopefully the editor and the reviewer will be positive and the manuscript will get accepted. So just to look at a few reasons for rejection, it's just out of scope. It's the wrong journal. Again, you can use the Elsevier journal finder there for looking at more suitable journals. If it's really badly formatted and it just doesn't follow the suggested structure, it can be rejected outright, or it can be sent back to you to rewrite. You know, if the language is bad and you just cannot understand it, again, it can be rejected straight away. If the methods, results, and conclusions are just not well presented or implemented, again, there's some deficiencies or things that have not been done very well, or there's gaps, etc. The lack of novelty is sometimes quite a difficult thing to make a decision on, you know, because we are editors, are researchers, scientists, but we might not be expert in all different areas. So again, if it happens to be in the editors or area of science that you can make a decision on the lack of novelty, then we will. You can always go to a lower impact factor journal. Try your luck there. But you need to really identify what your manuscript is in terms of novelty, originality. And to do that, you need to be aware of the scientific literature, the international scientific literature, and what's happening in your field, what's been published, what's really new. That's really important to do your homework there and make sure you can identify a novelty, originality for your work. We don't normally accept resubmission of rejected papers. So once they're rejected, that's it. You need to find another journal. Occasionally, we might rescind the rejection and give you an opportunity to do a major revision for reasons. There could be different reasons. You know, I normally get involved if an author complains that the handling editor or the reviewers have been unfair. So I normally act as a sort of arbitrator of those cases. And some of them do get rescinded and sent back for major revision, but not very frequently, I would say. After peer review and resubmission, you know, you can also be rejected if you don't provide an appropriate response to the reviewer's comments. We do not agree. It's not an appropriate response. You need to explain why you don't agree, scientifically or technically. You need to explain to the editor and also the reviewers not addressing the issue in the manuscript. You need to make sure you address the issue that's been raised in the manuscript. If you don't address all the reviewers' comments, again, the manuscript will come back and you will have to address them all. So again, there'll be delays to the timetable. Okay. So just to move on a little bit towards the end of my talk, we need to talk about publishing ethics because it can be a problem. Unethical behavior by researchers really degrades the scientific record and the reputation of the science and the journal. So we have ways of checking that within the journal. We have software that looks at duplication of manuscripts. If a manuscript's been published and you come along and submit a very similar paper, then we will see quite clearly it will have a high cross-check result. It can also be resubmitting a rejected manuscript when we've already said it's rejected. I think more serious is scientific misconduct, where results are falsified, or you have enhancement of data, or images as well. You're taking images that don't exist, and you're manipulating them, or you're copying images from other papers. And again, we can generally pick some of those up. I don't think we pick all of it up, but we do pick up an increasing number of cases. In terms of the publication misconduct, then, as I said, there's plagiarism, where you just copy word by word significant amounts of text from other published articles. Again, the software will pick that up. As I said, there's duplication of papers, where you would submit to more than one journal at the same time. And again, we can check that. We do talk to other journals, not just Elsevier journals, but other publishers. So we sometimes have a conversation with another editor that we've had the same paper submitted, and generally both manuscripts would be rejected at that time. As I said, duplicate publication is where we get a high cross-check score of a duplicated manuscript, and that can be a problem. We have authorship issues from time to time. Either authors complain that they've not been included, although they've made a significant contribution to the work, and they haven't been included, and then we would investigate with the corresponding author of the manuscript. We would sometimes have complaints that authors have been included and they haven't actually done any work on the manuscript, and again, we would investigate. You sometimes have conflict of interests, where one author, doesn't want the manuscript published, whereas the other authors do. So again, there's conflicts that need to get resolved. There's also a practice called self-citation, where authors would include a lot of their own publications. So those then would get cited, and then they would obviously then lead to an increase in the author's citations and H-index and things. That is generally unethical. You might want to cite one of your papers, for a good reason. But where you see 5 or 6 papers being included, then that really is a no-no. It can probably happen more in reviews than research papers. So we would actually ask then the author to remove lots of those papers. So that's important to realise. Another thing that's important is that the first author has a responsibility to conduct and supervise the data analysis and the presentation of the results in the paper. So that's their role. The co-authors are there to make intellectual contributions to the data analysis and contribution around data interpretation, and also helping to write the paper. So if co-authors don't do that, then you have to ask yourself, should they be a co-author or not? And then we also, we come across issues around ghost authors or gift authors, where authors are added to manuscripts when they have done no work at all for the manuscript, or authors invent the corresponding author would invent authors that don't exist. There's a few instances of that. So, just to be aware of those things. We pick up quite a few, but we don't always pick up everything. But I think increasingly we're looking to try and eliminate those sorts of practices. Authorship is important. There are guidelines on how to include authors. They should substantially contribute to the conception, design, acquisition of data, analysis, interpretation. They should help draft the article and revise it, give their approval for the final full version, and be accountable for all aspects of the work, ensuring the accuracy and integrity of any of the experiments were done. So all four conditions should be fulfilled for an author, So it's really important you make sure your co-authors would meet those criteria. You may want to add others that help you with the work as under acknowledgements, where you can acknowledge individual colleagues, collaborators, and also funding body, funding of the work, etc. is also important. So you would do that under acknowledgements. About 5 minutes left. Okay, so just quickly saying a little bit about publishing models. There's traditional subscription model where authors publish free and institutions or individuals subscribe to journals is what we've had over the last few decades, I would say. Open access is becoming more popular, but again, the author or the funding agency needs to pay a publication fee, and then the article is made freely available to all online. Some journals publish exclusively open access, like Food Chemistry X. Other subscription journals would also offer open access. I would say in Europe now, the European Union funding of research projects, there's a criteria now that all publications need to be open access in order to meet fair data rules. So in a big project, you have lots of papers, they all need to be published open access. And if you don't do that, then you can't include the papers as part of the results of the project. So it is important, but also challenging because you need to find a way to pay for the publication fees. Okay, so there is an author resources on the Elsevier website, which helps you with getting your papers published and answering questions. And you could go online and have a look at anything there. I'm very happy to follow up with any questions now if we have time, or we can do that by email if you want to collect questions up. Thank you very much. And I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul, for such comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much. So, because I think we have one question in the chat room. We have question from Lydia. Why cited our publication is not ethics?
Sorry, why
citing our own publication is not ethic?
Right
in the chat room.
Okay, so it's not ethical because you are providing a citation to your own work, and if you do that all the time and you do that by citing lots of your papers, then your self H index or something is going to increase. So that's considered to be unethical. All right. So you can, you can include one of your papers maybe, but you shouldn't
cite it only
more. You can cite other papers on the same topic, but not yours. I think that's the message. That's not always clear to authors, but you know, it is important. We also have some editors. They don't remain editors for very long, but some editors will encourage the submission of papers to their own journal, you know, which again is unethical. You know, it's up to the author to decide where they publish.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the answer. Is there still any question from the students, please?
I know food chemistry is quite popular in Malaysia.
In Indonesia as well.
But we don't get so many papers from Malaysia as we do from China. China's the biggest submitter, I would say, at the moment. But other Asian countries, Thailand, South Korea, Malaysia, you know, they're becoming more popular with those countries.
How about Indonesia?
Yes, yeah, not so many, I would say.
Okay.
And again, we would be very happy to increase the numbers. We try, and on the editorial board and also the editors, we try and cover the different regions of the world. So we have some Asian editorial board members, Australasia area as well, but sometimes that helps to encourage the submission.
Dr. Paul, I also have a question. In food chemistry, you have two types of submission, right? Open access and the traditional one.
Yes,
so,
that's correct.
So how about the acceptance possibility? Are both equal? I mean, do we have a bigger chance to get accepted if we choose open access or no?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
We use the same editors and editorial board and reviewers as food chemistry. So the idea that both journals would be a similar standard. But if you particularly want to have an open access paper, then Food Chemistry X would be the one.
Okay. Yeah. Because the open access fee is quite high.
Yes. Yeah. And we have the same challenge in UK and Europe. I get in my own organization, I get money for 1 or 2 open access papers a year from the organization or from the funding body.
Yeah.
So you need to, you know, push the university and whoever funds you to give you more funding to do at least 1 open access paper a year.
Yeah, this is also to answer a question from Fatima. So Fatima, food chemistry still has a subscription option, yeah, for the submission.
Yes.
Not all our classes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, still question from the students? Because I think Dr. Paul is very busy. Okay, we have one more. Is it okay, Dr. Paul?
Yes, fine. Yeah.
Okay, Asrawati, I think about self-citation is already answered by Paul, yeah, previously. Okay, so let's go to Henry. What are usually the biggest factors of rejection for articles originating from Asian countries, including from Indonesia?
That's a good question. I would say the papers are either out of scope or borderline. That's one reason. Maybe the English is not so good.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
I understand that that's difficult. And then the third one I would say is the novelty, originality. Is it really novel or original based on other published works? So, you know, do your homework. If you want to publish a manuscript, then make sure it does advance the science or the method. You know, that's really important. You need to look at the international literature and make sure you're advancing what you're doing in your paper. They're the three things I think that you can, you know, take home. I would say take home message.
So actually reading a lot about other papers. Our study is very important, yeah, Paul.
Yeah, putting it in context, putting your work in context with other work, and making sure that you're actually really doing something original or novel. Yeah.
Okay. Do you still have some time or?
Yes. Yeah. I have a few minutes.
Okay, please. Other questions? Lydia, is that mean that we may not write our Lydia? This actually she is the one who asked about the self-citation. Is that mean that we may not write our name in reference at all?
Well, I think you could if it was justifiable, you could include one of your papers.
Yeah.
You know, but I wouldn't expect to see 6 or 7 papers.
Yeah. So if
it adds nothing to the manuscript, and it's also poor ethics. You need to find other papers that are that you can cite that are not yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, because sometimes it happened to us that the editor give immediate rejection, but then he suggested to transfer to other journal. What do you think? Shall we take this option or what? Is it better for us?
Yeah. As I said to you, the that option is not so. I would say about 20% maybe take that option. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean it's going to be accepted by the other journal, although the other journal, if it's an Elsevier journal, then it would receive your reviewer's comments already. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it may not have to go out to review again.
Okay.
The editor might come back to you and say, can you change this, this, and this? Mm-hmm. So there was a possibility that it might be published more quickly rather than starting afresh.
Yeah. But sometimes they suggest to the paid journal. That's also the
yes.
problem.
Yeah. I know. So that again is a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Still.
So we have. I was going to say, Food Chemistry X is open access. So if paying is a problem, then you could also look at Advances in Food Chemistry, which is a lesser journal. And it's got a slightly more wide scope, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that's worth looking at.
Okay, is there still any question from the audience? Please ask. Yeah, we have Paul here. Very rare occasion, yeah, to have such big names in our webinar. So please ask. No more questions. Okay, so I think no question anymore. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for your time. I know you are busy, but really, I didn't expect that you answer my email immediately. So it's such an honor to have you here.
No, it's my pleasure. So and I really hope we see more papers from Indonesia.
We try our best. Okay,
good.
So
thank you ever so much.
Before we end, This, oh, wait, well done. Oh, still one question. Is that okay, Paul?
Yes, fine. Yeah.
So, Wildan wants you to explain more about the ghost author.
Yeah. Ghost authors don't exist. You know, a paper has got a number of authors on, and then when you check the authors, you know, we can't find them. So we use this term ghost author. So, you know, it may or may not be an issue. For the corresponding author needs to be very careful in you know, doing that practice. Or, you know, we have had occasions where an author, the corresponding author, puts another author on the paper and submits it, and the other author doesn't know anything about it, you know, which is also, you know, unethical. So you need to talk, you know, if you're a postdoc or a PhD, you would normally talk to your supervisor and they would advise you, you know, what to do. But just be careful. You know, I'm not saying that practice is widespread in Indonesia, but we do see it in some Asian countries.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
One more. Is there any suggestion in regard to the website of Journal in Food Science that not to take long to accept our manuscript?
What was the first part of that question?
Which journal is, what is that? The timeline is not too long.
Yeah, that has been a problem with food chemistry, mainly because the number of papers we've been receiving and the time it takes to handle those. You know, we've taken on more editors this year. We will take on more editors next year. At the moment, it's about, I think, 25 weeks on average for a paper to go through, 20 to 25 weeks. So you're looking at, you know, five months. You know, it sometimes goes quicker than that. But if you want a paper published for your PhD or whatever, then my advice is start early. You know,
yeah,
give yourself at least 6 months to get it published before you need it.
Yeah, that's what I always
plan well.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Okay, thank you for the answer. Okay, do you still have some questions? No, nobody want to speak directly. Okay, they prefer to write. Okay, so I think we don't have any more questions. Paul, before we end this session, so I think the committee have something like a token appreciation for you, and they want to show you here. Please, Prabowo, yeah, could you please show the token of appreciation here for Dr. Paul before we end the sessions?
Beneficia?
Yeah, Beneficia, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nancy.
Langsung aja ya.
Yeah.
Langsung saja. Jadi
yeah. So Prabowo and Ayu, please, you can give the certificate.
So they prepare the certificate for you.
Oh, thank you. You can send it by email. Send it by email.
Sure. I will send.
Thank you very much. Just last thing for
oh, sorry for the noise.
Yeah, it's been a noise. I'll be at the International Congress of Nutrition in Tokyo in a couple of weeks' time. So if any of you are there, just come and say hello.
Oh, sure. When will it be?
It's about the 3rd or 4th of December. For about a week, so, yeah. So if any of you are there, just come and say hello.
Sure. If some of us go there, I will let you know. Yeah, but I will not go because
No,
I have
no,
to, yeah. Okay.
you have to teach. Yes.
Yeah. Ini Prabowo apa sertifikatnya ada? Do you have the certificate, Prabowo?
Yes. Ada.
Yes. So please, and they also want to have a picture with you, Dr. Paul.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah, sure. How do you want to do that?
yeah, I think you can close your share screen for now, I think.
Oh yeah, sorry, I've
So
got
we can see
my
the audience.
I don't think I have it. Stop share. Okay, sorry. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. See, this is the certificate that they.
Yes. Oh,
No,
lovely.
No, this is for me. for Dr. Paul Prabowo, please. Yeah. They also have for you. Yeah, here. This is for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul.
Thank you very much.
Great pleasure to have you here. Okay.
Thanks, Ed.
I will send
Say
you
goodbye.
3 emails. So now we can have a picture together, please.
Yep.
The screen. There are 85 students here.
Okay.
And,
excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so we have several pages. Okay, who will take a picture, Prabowo?
Yeah. Okay. I will count down.
Okay, so you can count.
Yeah. In 3, 2, 1.
Cheese.
And the second, this way.
Second page.
In 3, 2, 1.
Third page. How many pages are there?
4.
Okay, last one. Wow, they are so enthusiastic.
And the last page. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this is the end of our session. So thank you again to Dr. Paul Finglas, also to everyone who are here now to attend this seminar. So let us close this webinar by Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So good day, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Bye-bye.
Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr.